The shy new receptionist helped a deaf visitor using sign language, without knowing the Millionaire CEO was watching, and the proposal he made left her speechless. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. If there was a prize for worst first day on the job ever, Melody Hart was about to win it, without question. The very moment she tried to walk through the revolving doors of Stanford Enterprise, her purse got stuck on one arm, a hot cup of coffee was balanced on the other, and the heel of her flat shoe snagged on the carpet. She didn't walk in. She flew in, literally shot across the lobby, sending papers, coffee, and every ounce of dignity flying in a 2-meter radius. Great. Starting with style, she muttered as she gathered papers from the floor, trying to ignore the stares from security guards, and the mocking grin of the senior receptionist, who watched the scene like she was enjoying a comedy show. Melody finally sat down at the nearby desk, where the chair made suspicious creaking noises, and her access badge didn't work properly. She took a deep breath, adjusted her glasses, and tried to look professional, even though she still looked like a comedy character who stumbled into the wrong set. That's when the silence in the lobby was broken in an unusual way. A well-dressed man with neatly combed hair and impeccable clothes walked up to the front desk. There was something different about him. Instead of speaking, he began moving his hands in smooth, precise gestures. The receptionist beside her, the same one who laughed at the revolving door incident, raised an eyebrow, scoffed, and said loudly, "Sir, I don't understand what you're doing. This is a front desk, not a street mime act." The man stopped. His expressive eyes hesitated. An awkward silence filled the air. Melody was watching everything. Her heart began to race. She recognized those gestures. Her grandmother on her mother's side had been deaf, and learning sign language had been their most fun and loving way of talking. It had been years since she practiced, but her fingers remembered. Before the man could walk away, Melody stood up. She walked toward him, nervous but determined. And then she signed, "Hello, sir. Can I help you?" The man's face changed like someone had turned on a light inside him. A smile formed on his lips. His eyes shined with gratitude. He responded quickly, and Melody translated aloud for the receptionist, who was now turning red with embarrassment. "He has a meeting with the partnerships department. He's a bit early and wanted to confirm the contact's name. I can check for him, if that's okay." The woman nodded silently. As Melody looked it up, the whole lobby was watching, including Blake Stanford. The Millionaire CEO was watching everything from the gallery near the executive elevators. Blake Stanford, a legend in the tech world. Not known for smiling or for spontaneous social interaction, but in that moment, when no one was looking, his lips curved just slightly. For the first time in months, he smiled. As Melody returned to her desk, still a little flushed, she had no idea she had just lived a moment that would change the course of her life. On the executive floor, back in his minimalist office, Blake leaned back in his chair and turned toward the giant window overlooking Manhattan. "Will," he said calmly, still looking out at the city below, "I want a full report on the new receptionist. Name, education, background, everything." The assistant hesitated. "Everything, sir?" Blake laced his fingers together. "Everything, including where she learned sign language." The second day at Stanford Enterprise began with Melody making a promise to herself. No tripping, no flying through revolving doors, no becoming the company's circus act in the lobby. "Today I'll be the model employee," she whispered, adjusting the cheap blazer she had bought just to look more professional. "I'll be invisible, competent, and most importantly, stay on my feet." The promise lasted exactly 3 hours and 42 minutes. It all started when the coffee machine at reception decided to go on strike. The senior receptionist, whom Melody had now learned was named Sandra, grunted in frustration. "This piece of junk broke again. I'll have to go all the way up to the 10th floor to get decent coffee." Melody, in a desperate attempt to be helpful and maybe win a smile from the always grumpy coworker, volunteered. "I can go. I'm pretty familiar with elevators." "Well, not exactly, but learning is part of the job, right?" Sandra looked at her like she had offered to do ballet on the roof. "You? On the executive floor? Sweetheart, that world up there, people cost more than my car." Good thing my car only cost $50 at the junkyard, Melody laughed. I won't be embarrassing myself in front of anyone important. 15 minutes later, she was riding the executive elevator, holding a tray with 4 cups of coffee, trying not to spill anything as the elevator rose smoothly. She was even feeling confident, like, look at me. I'm a professional carrying coffee like a real executive. That's when the elevator stopped on the 12th floor. The doors opened, and in walked a tall man, wearing a perfect suit, with dark hair neatly combed and a posture that silently said, I have more money in my wallet than you make in a year. He didn't even glance at her. He just pressed the lobby button and checked his phone. Melody tried to lean against the wall to make space, but forgot she was holding the tray. Her elbow hit the wall, the tray wobbled, and the world seemed to move in slow motion. 4 coffee cups flew in different directions. One hit the elevator mirror. Another hit the floor. A third one splashed on the control panel. And the fourth? The fourth had a very specific and embarrassing destination. Right onto the man's Italian leather shoes. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Melody dropped to the floor, trying to wipe his shoes with paper napkins. I'll pay for the cleaning, or buy you new ones, or, wow, those shoes probably cost more than my entire apartment rent. Instead of the explosion of anger she expected, she heard something completely unexpected. Laughter. A real, warm laugh that echoed in the small elevator. Melody looked up, still on her knees, and met the amused gaze of the man. There was something familiar in his eyes, but she couldn't quite place it. It's okay, he said, his voice gentle, surprisingly gentle for someone with such an intimidating look. They're just shoes. Shoes that cost more than 3 months of my salary, she replied, still trying to salvage what was left of her dignity. Seriously, I've been working here for 2 days and I've already turned into a walking disaster machine. He looked genuinely curious. And how have those 2 days been so far? Well, Melody finally stood up, wiping her hands on her blazer. On the first day, I flew through the revolving door like a drunk bird. Today, I turned an elevator into a post-it coffee shop. Tomorrow, I'll probably set something on fire by accident. His laughter grew louder. I'm the new receptionist, also the new comedy act downstairs, Melody Hart, expert in disasters and awkward situations. She extended her hand, which was still a little sticky from coffee. He shook her hand without hesitation. Blake. Nice to meet you, Blake. And sorry about your shoes. They were really nice. Were? Well, now they've got a more caffeinated personality. The elevator reached the lobby, and the doors opened. Blake stepped out first, but turned to her. It was a pleasure meeting you, Melody. I'm sure we'll see each other again. She stood still in the elevator for a moment, watching him walk off into the executive hallway. There was something about him that intrigued her. Most people would have been furious about coffee on expensive shoes, but he laughed. Really laughed. Weird, she muttered, pressing the lobby button again. Back at the front desk, Sandra greeted her with a mix of curiosity and panic. Where's the coffee? And why do you look like you got in a fight with an espresso machine? Long story, Melody sighed, trying to wipe the stains from her blazer. Let's just say I met someone interesting in the elevator. Interesting how? Like he's going to sue me, interesting, or he's going to fire me, interesting. More like, laughed at his own coffee-soaked shoes, interesting. Sandra raised an eyebrow. Honey, you have to tell me that story properly. But before Melody could answer, a familiar voice called behind her. Melody? She turned around and nearly choked. It was Blake, the Blake from the elevator. Only now he was standing right there at the front desk, and everyone was looking at him with a kind of reverence she didn't understand. Hi again, she said, trying to sound casual while silently panicking. Are your shoes doing better? Almost dry. Do you have a minute? We need to talk. Sandra turned pale. The security guard straightened up. Even the plants seemed to stand at attention. Sure. Melody replied, still not understanding why everyone was acting like the world was about to end. Talk about what? Blake looked around, noticing the audience that had formed. I'd rather talk in private. Can you come with me? It wasn't until she saw Sandra waving her hands in full panic mode, the universal sign for you're in serious trouble, that Melody began to suspect. Maybe Blake wasn't just another well-dressed employee. Are you okay? She asked, following him toward the elevators. I am, he replied, pressing the executive elevator button. Actually, I'm better than I expected to be. The doors opened, and they stepped in. Melody noticed that this time, he pressed the button for the top floor, a floor she didn't even know existed. Blake, she said slowly, what department do you work in again? He turned to her with that mysterious smile she was beginning to recognize. Let's just say I work in the Department of Important Decisions. And as the elevator rose, Melody had a clear feeling that her life was about to take a completely unexpected turn. The office on the top floor of Stanford Enterprise was the size of Melody's entire apartment. Huge windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan, and the minimalist decor practically shouted, "Someone very important and very wealthy works here." Blake walked over to a mahogany desk and sat down, motioning to a chair for her. "Please, have a seat." Melody sat, but couldn't help commenting, "Wow, this office is bigger than my hometown. You must be like the boss of all the bosses, huh?" "Something like that," he answered with a quiet smile. "Great, so I spilled coffee on the shoes of the guy who can fire me with the snap of his fingers." She put a hand to her forehead. "My mom always said I had a gift for getting into trouble, but this is Olympic level." Blake laughed again, a sound Melody was starting to enjoy hearing. "Relax, you're not in trouble. Actually, I want to make you an offer." "An offer?" Her eyes widened. "Like a job offer, or like take this money and disappear kind of offer?" "Definitely the first one." "Oh, thank goodness. For a second there I thought I was walking into one of those TV pranks. You know, hidden cameras, everyone laughing at the receptionist who can't even walk through a door properly." Blake leaned forward, his face becoming more serious. "Melody, I saw what you did yesterday, with the deaf visitor." "Oh," she blushed. "That? It was just natural. My grandma taught me when I was little." "Exactly. Natural." He repeated the word with meaning. "No awkwardness, no making it a big deal. You just had a conversation." "Well, that's what sign language is. It's a way to talk. Most people don't see it that way. They see it as complicated, different, difficult." Melody frowned. "Clearly, those people never met my Grandma Rose. She was deaf and had the strongest personality in the whole family. If she wanted something, she got it, sign language or not." Blake smiled with genuine admiration. "That's exactly the kind of attitude I need for a special project." "Special project? That sounds like code for Mission Impossible. I want to implement a full accessibility program in the company. Not just ramps and elevators, but real communication. Sign language, staff training, inclusive culture." Melody stared at him for a long moment. "Are you serious?" "Completely. And you want me to help?" "I want you to lead it." She almost fell out of her chair. "Me? Lead it? Did you see me yesterday? I'm a walking disaster. Yesterday I flew through a revolving door. Today I turned an elevator into a coffee war zone. Tomorrow I'll probably set something on fire. And still, you stopped to help someone who needed it. Any decent person would." "Melody," Blake said gently, "you'd be surprised how many people wouldn't." She studied him for a moment. There was something in his eyes, a sincerity that caught her off guard. "Why is this so important to you?" For a moment, Blake hesitated. Then he sighed. "My younger sister Emma was born deaf. We grew up in a family that saw it as a problem to hide. She spent years feeling invisible, ignored. By the time I left home and was finally able to help her, it was almost too late." "Is Emma okay now?" "She is. She's a doctor in Seattle, married, happy, but it took years for her to believe she deserved to be heard." Melody felt a tightness in her chest. "And now you want to make sure others don't go through the same thing?" "I want places like this to be truly accessible, not just on paper." She sat quietly, trying to take it all in. "So, you want me, the girl who can't carry coffee without causing a catastrophe, to lead an important corporate project and also teach you sign language?" "I want you, the woman who saw someone in need and didn't hesitate, to help me make this company better." "Wow." Melody took a deep breath. "That's a lot of pressure." "Do you accept?" She looked him in the eye. There was determination there, but also vulnerability. "Can I ask a question?" "Of course. If I accept and mess everything up, which, let's be honest, is a real possibility, are you going to fire me?" Blake smiled. "Melody, in the past 2 days you've brought more genuine life into this company than I've seen in years. I doubt you could mess things up more than they already are." "Okay, But if I accidentally set something on fire, don't say I didn't warn you. I accept the risk. Then I accept the challenge. In the days that followed, what began as a company project turned into something unexpectedly fun. Blake started showing up at the front desk every afternoon for lessons with Melody. "All right, first lesson," she said, sitting on the edge of the desk. "You need to stop making that pain face when you try to sign." "I'm not making a pain face. You look like you're solving a complicated math problem with your fingers." Blake tried the sign for thank you again. But the movements were stiff, formal. "See? There it is again. The pain face. So how am I supposed to look then?" "Natural, like when you laugh at my clumsy moments." "You want me to look cheerful while signing?" "I want you to look human." He laughed, and when he tried again, the sign was much smoother. "Better." Melody clapped. "Now you look like you're actually saying thank you, not acting out a mime routine." "And now I'll teach you how to walk into a meeting without tripping." Blake said, "Oh, that's easy. The secret is never wear heels and always know where the nearest exit is." Melody, all right. Step 1, look straight ahead, not at your feet." Blake said, "That's hard." "It's very easy," Blake replied with a smile. "For you, maybe. For me, looking at my feet has always felt like the safer choice." They began walking down the hallway. Blake watched her, trying not to laugh as she exaggerated every step. "Step 2, walk like you belong here." "And how does someone walk like they belong here?" "Well, the way you normally walk. I normally walk into things, then walk like I do. You walk like you own the place." Blake stopped and looked at her. "Melody." "What? I do own the place." She blinked a few times. "I'm sorry, what?" "Stanford Enterprise. My last name is Stanford." Melody stood frozen in the middle of the hallway, processing what she just heard. "Are you telling me I spilled coffee on the shoes of the billionaire CEO of the company?" "Technically, yes." "And then I called those shoes expensive?" "Also yes. And now I'm giving sign language lessons to the man who literally owns the building we're standing in." "That's how it appears." Melody covered her face with her hands. "My mom is going to faint when she hears about this." "Why?" "You're doing an amazing job." "Blake," she said, taking her hands off her face, "you could buy my entire hometown and use it as decoration in your office." "Probably," he admitted, "but you can do something I can't." "What's that?" "You make people feel important. Seen." Before she could respond, a woman's voice echoed through the hallway. "Blake? Blake Stanford?" They turned around. A tall, elegant blonde woman, wearing a suit that likely cost more than Melody's car, walked toward them with a perfect smile. Blake immediately stiffened. "Eliza?" "What an incredible coincidence," she said, approaching with open arms. "I was visiting my lawyer's office on the 10th floor and thought, I wonder if my dear ex-fiancé is in the building." Melody felt a strange twinge in her stomach at the words, ex-fiancé. "Eliza, this is Melody. She's working with me on a special project." Eliza looked at Melody like she was an interesting little bug. "How lovely. And what's your background, Melody?" "I work the front desk." "How practical." Blake quickly stepped in. "Melody is a specialist in inclusive communication." "Oh, of course." Eliza's smile became even more artificial. Blake always had these philanthropic phases. "It's not philanthropy, Eliza. It's business." "Of course it is, dear." She touched his arm in a familiar way. "By the way, I have wonderful news. I'm getting married." Blake raised an eyebrow. "Congratulations. To your brother." The silence that followed was so thick, Melody was sure you could cut it with a knife. "To Daniel? Isn't it amazing how things work out? After we broke up, I spent more time with your family, and Daniel and I realized we had so much in common." Melody watched Blake's face harden. "I'm sure you did. You'll come to the wedding, won't you? It'll be at your parents' country club in 3 weeks. I'll think about it." "Wonderful." Eliza turned to Melody with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "It was a pleasure meeting you." "Melody, was it? What a unique name." And with that, she walked away, leaving behind expensive perfume and a very uncomfortable atmosphere. Blake stood still, watching her walk away. "Your ex-fiancé is marrying your brother?" Melody asked gently. "Apparently." "That's complicated." "That's one word for it." Melody studied his face. There was hurt there, but also something that looked like relief. "Do you still love her?" Blake turned to her, and for a moment their eyes met in a way that made Melody's heart race. "No," he said simply. But it still hurts to know she finally got what she always wanted: permanent access to the Stanford family. And what she always wanted was never really you. Melody, Blake said softly. People like Eliza don't want people. They want positions. As they walked back to the elevator in silence, Melody couldn't stop thinking about the look in Blake's eyes, a mix of disappointment and something else she couldn't quite name, but that made her chest feel tight in a completely new way. 2 days after the run-in with Eliza, Blake showed up at the front desk with a look Melody was already learning to recognize, that mix of determination and nervousness he tried to cover up with formality. "Melody, do you have plans for Friday night?" She looked up from the forms she was sorting. "Well, I was planning on a marathon of bad romantic movies and a family-sized pizza." "Why?" "The company has its annual event, a networking party with clients and investors." "Sounds fancy. I'm guessing there will be expensive hors d'oeuvres and French champagne." "Actually, yes." Blake hesitated. "Would you like to go with me?" Melody blinked several times. "You're asking me to a fancy corporate party?" "I am." "Blake," she said slowly, "do you remember who you're inviting? The girl who turns elevators into disaster zones?" "I remember perfectly." "And you still want to take me to an event full of important people?" "Especially because of that." She looked at him for a long moment. "Do you have some kind of death wish?" Blake laughed. "I just believe you'll bring something genuine to the evening." Genuine is a classy word for walking potential catastrophe. "Melody." All right. But if I cause an international incident, don't say I didn't warn you." On Friday night, Melody stood in front of the bathroom mirror in her tiny apartment, staring at the navy blue dress she had rented specifically for the occasion. "Okay, Melody," she murmured to her reflection. "You can do this. It's just a party. Normal people go to parties all the time without causing disasters." She slipped on the high heels she borrowed from her neighbor, and immediately felt like she was walking on stilts. "This is going to end badly," she sighed, swapping the heels for the cleanest pair of sneakers she owned. "Better to look relaxed than break my neck." The dress looked perfect when she left home. The problem started when she tried to get out of the taxi gracefully. The fabric caught in the door, she tugged too hard, and a 6-inch tear opened along the side of the dress. "Perfect," she muttered, tying a sweatshirt around her waist to cover the damage. "Now I look like someone who got lost on the way to the gym." Blake was waiting at the hotel entrance, looking impeccable in a black tuxedo. When he saw her approaching in sneakers and a sweatshirt tied at the waist, his expression went through several emotions before settling on amusement. "Let me guess," he said. "There was an incident." "The dress decided it didn't want to go to the party," she explained. "Apparently it had other plans." "You look lovely." "Blake, I'm wearing sneakers to a black tie event." "And you look perfect just like that." Before she could argue, he offered his arm. "Shall we? I'd like to introduce you to a few people." The ballroom was full of well-dressed guests, quiet conversations, and the kind of sophisticated atmosphere that made Melody feel like she had walked into the wrong place. "Relax," Blake whispered in her ear. "They don't bite." "Are you sure? That woman over there looks like she's sizing me up for dinner." 5 minutes later, the first disaster happened. A middle-aged Asian man approached, and Melody, nervous and trying to be helpful, asked, "Excuse me, are you the DJ? Because I was hoping someone could play something a little more upbeat. This music is kind of funereal." Blake nearly choked on his champagne. "Melody," he said once he could speak again, "this is Hiroshi Tanaka, our main Japanese investor." Melody's face turned the same shade as the wine she was serving. Oh no, Mr. Tanaka, I'm so sorry. I thought the tux and you were near the sound equipment." To everyone's surprise, Hiroshi began to laugh. "The music really is a little too somber," he said in perfect English. "Maybe you should give the real DJ a few suggestions." The second disaster happened 10 minutes later, when Melody decided to try the fancy hors d'oeuvres. "What is this thing?" she asked, holding something that looked like a tiny stuffed croissant. "Shrimp canapé with mango sauce," Blake explained. "Oh, I love shrimp." She took a big bite and immediately started coughing, and coughing, and coughing some more. "Water," she managed to say between coughs. "Please." Blake rushed to get water, but not before half the ballroom turned to see Melody having what looked like an allergic reaction to the canapé. Breathe, she told herself. Remember how to breathe. The third and most spectacular disaster happened just as she stopped coughing and quickly turned to thank Blake for the water. The sudden movement made her bump into an elegant woman passing by with a glass of champagne. The golden liquid flew in a perfect arc and landed directly on the woman's cream-colored silk dress. Melody froze in horror when she realized who the victim was. Blake's mother. "Oh no," she whispered. "Mrs. Stanford, I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the dry cleaning, or buy you a new dress, or—" Margaret Stanford looked at her soaked dress, then at Melody, then at her son, who had arrived with napkins. For a moment, there was total silence. Then, to everyone's surprise, Margaret started laughing. "You know what?" she said. "This dress has been bothering me all night. Too tight. Now I have the perfect excuse to go home and put on something comfortable." Blake looked at his mother like she'd grown a second head. "Mom, are you sure you're all right?" "I'm perfectly fine, dear, and your friend has remarkable aim." Melody was still in shock when Margaret leaned in and whispered, "Between you and me, sweetheart, this party was duller than a documentary about taxes. You brought a little life to the evening." As Margaret walked off toward the exit, laughing and greeting people along the way, Blake turned to Melody. "You just managed to do something I thought was impossible." "What? Ruin your mom's dress?" "You made her laugh. Really laugh. I haven't seen her do that in years." Melody looked at him. "You're not mad?" "Mad?" Blake smiled. "Melody, you turned the most boring corporate party of the year into the most fun this hotel has ever seen. I spilled champagne on your mother, and she loved every second of it." He took a step closer, and Melody felt her heart speed up. "You're amazing," he said softly. "Absolutely, genuinely amazing." Across the ballroom, Eliza watched the scene with narrowed eyes. She had arrived as Daniel's date, but her attention was entirely focused on the interaction between Blake and the clumsy receptionist. When she saw Blake lean in to whisper something in Melody's ear, and saw the smile that lit up Melody's face, Eliza felt a sharp pang of something she couldn't quite name. "Interesting," she murmured to herself, watching how Blake's eyes sparkled when he looked at Melody. Daniel appeared beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" "About how fascinating it is when people show their true colors," she replied, never taking her eyes off Blake and Melody. "You're talking about my brother?" "Among others." Eliza kept watching, an idea beginning to take shape in her mind, an idea that could solve 2 problems at once, make sure nothing got in the way of her wedding to Daniel, and remove any distraction that might complicate her final integration into the Stanford family. The next morning, while Melody was still processing everything that had happened the night before, and wondering if she had really seen that special look in Blake's eyes, Eliza was already on the phone with Amanda Richardson, Stanford Enterprise's Director of Human Resources. "Amanda? This is Eliza Morrison. I need to talk to you about a delicate situation that could affect the company's reputation." "Of course, Eliza. What's this about?" "It's about the new receptionist." "Melody something. I've heard some concerning comments about the methods she's using to get Blake's attention." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What kind of comments?" "Well," Eliza said, choosing her words carefully, "it seems like she's using her position to get close to him inappropriately, trying to seduce him for personal gain. You know how harmful these situations can be for the company if they become public." "I understand your concern. I'll look into it." "Thank you, Amanda. We all just want to protect Stanford Enterprise's integrity." Eliza hung up with a satisfied smile. Sometimes problems could be solved with a simple strategic conversation. Monday arrived with Melody still smiling about the events of the party. For the first time since she started working at Stanford Enterprise, she felt like she belonged. Blake had messaged her on Sunday saying he wanted to continue working on the accessibility project, and she was excited to see him again. That feeling lasted exactly until 9:47 a.m. Melody Hart, she looked up and saw a well-dressed woman in her 50s, holding a clipboard and wearing an expression that didn't promise good news. "That's me. Amanda Richardson, Human Resources. I need to speak with you. Now." Sandra, the senior receptionist, made a face that clearly meant, "You're in trouble." "Sure," Melody said, trying to sound casual. Is there a problem with my hiring paperwork? Not exactly. The HR meeting room was small, windowless, and had that unmistakable smell of impending trouble. Amanda sat across the table with a folder that looked like it held Melody's entire criminal record. Melody, we've received some concerns regarding your professional behavior. My behavior? Melody blinked, confused. I know I'm still learning, but I've really been doing my best. Specifically, your interactions with the company's CEO. Melody's stomach dropped. With Blake? Mr. Stanford, Amanda corrected her coolly. There are claims that you've been using your position to get close to him in an inappropriate manner. Inappropriate? Melody's voice jumped an octave. What are you talking about? Melody, I'll be direct. We've received reports that you're trying to seduce the CEO to gain promotions and perks. For a moment, Melody was speechless. Then she started laughing, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. Seduce? Me? Have you seen me? I'm the person who flew through the revolving door on her first day. My only seduction skill is creating awkward accidents. This isn't a joke, Melody. You're right, it's not. Her laughter stopped cold. It's ridiculous. Who said this? I can't reveal the source, but it's someone reliable with legitimate concerns about the company's integrity. Melody felt a wave of suspicion. Amanda, Blake, Mr. Stanford, asked me to help with an accessibility project. It's about work, sign language, nothing more. And the frequent visits to the front desk, the private meetings, the party on Friday? Visits to discuss the project. And the party. Melody blushed. He invited me as a colleague. Melody, I saw you two at the party. The voice came from the doorway. Eliza stood there with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Eliza, Amanda said, thank you for coming. Melody felt the room spin around her. You? You made this accusation? I simply shared my observations, Eliza replied smoothly. And frankly, I wasn't the only one who noticed. Noticed what? The way you look at him, how you act around him. It's quite obvious, dear. I work with him. And how convenient, isn't it? A regular receptionist suddenly working directly with the billionaire CEO? The shame burned in Melody's chest like acid. Are you suggesting that I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just concerned about the company's reputation and about Blake. Melody, Amanda interrupted. Given the delicate nature of this situation, I think it's best to transfer you to another department, away from any direct contact with executive leadership. You're punishing me for doing my job? We're protecting everyone involved. That's when the door burst open. Blake entered the room like a storm of irritation and confusion. What's going on here? Blake, Eliza said, pretending to be surprised. I didn't know you were. Why is Melody being questioned by HR? Amanda straightened in her chair. Mr. Stanford, there were some concerns about. What concerns? Melody stood up suddenly. Blake, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He turned to Amanda. Melody is working on a project that I personally approved and oversee. Any concerns about it should have come directly to me. The allegations were of a personal nature, Amanda said gently. Personal? Eliza stepped forward. Blake, we've all seen how you interact. The special attention, the private meetings, the way she looks at you. Blake was silent for a moment that felt too long. And what exactly is the problem with that? The question caught everyone off guard. Blake, Eliza said softly, you need to consider your position, the company. I think about my position every day, he replied coldly. And I think about how this company treats people. Melody is an outstanding employee doing important work. No one's questioning her work, Amanda said quickly. Just her motivations. Melody couldn't take it anymore. The humiliation, the suggestion that she was some kind of opportunist, and Blake having to defend her like she was a child. Enough, she said quietly. Everyone turned toward her. Enough, she said again louder. You want to know the truth? The truth is I'm a clumsy receptionist who spilled coffee on the CEO's shoes. The truth is he was kind enough not to fire me and even gave me a chance to work on something important. She looked directly at Eliza. And if you think I have some master plan to seduce anyone, you clearly don't know me. My only talent is causing embarrassing accidents. Blake took a step toward her. Melody. No, Blake. Thank you for trying to defend me, but I don't need that. She turned to Amanda. Keep your transfer. I'm resigning. The silence in the room was deafening. Melody, it doesn't have to be this way, Blake said, and there was something in his voice she hadn't heard before. Yes, it does. She picked up her bag. I don't belong in this world. Everyone knows it, including me. That's not true. Blake, she said gently, thank you for everything. Really? But some things just aren't meant for some people. And she left the room before anyone could say another word. Blake stood there, staring at the door she had just walked through. Well, Eliza said, breaking the silence, at least now there are no more complications. Blake turned to her with an expression that made Eliza take a step back. Eliza, if you think you did anyone a favor, you're very wrong. And he walked out, leaving Amanda and Eliza alone with the weight of what had just happened. Melody was down in the lobby, gathering her things from the front desk, when Sandra walked over. Honey, are you sure about this? I am, Melody replied, trying not to cry. It was fun while it lasted. You going to be okay? I always am. That's when she heard footsteps approaching. She turned and saw Lucas, the deaf visitor she had helped on her first day. He was smiling and holding a colorful brochure. Lucas. What a surprise, Melody signed. He signed back. I was hoping to find you. I wanted to invite you to an event my nonprofit is hosting this weekend. A corporate accessibility program. Would you be interested? Melody looked at the brochure, then at his hopeful face. Why not? She had nothing to lose. You know what, Lucas? I'd love to. As she walked out through the revolving door, this time without tripping, Melody looked up and saw Blake standing in the upstairs gallery, watching her leave with an expression that held frustration, confusion, and something he was still learning to recognize. Something that looked a lot like a broken heart. The weekend came faster than Melody expected. After 3 days at home, watching bad movies and eating a questionable amount of ice cream, she decided it was time to stop feeling sorry for herself and do something productive. At least I have somewhere to go, she murmured as she got ready for Lucas's nonprofit event. And maybe I'll meet normal people who don't think I'm some kind of schemer. Her friend Kaylee called while she was deciding between two equally simple dresses. Melody, how are you? I heard at the office that you left the company. Kaylee worked in the marketing department at Stanford Enterprise and had been one of the few people who was kind to Melody from day one. Oh, Kaylee, let's just say I learned I'm not exactly cut out for corporate life. That's nonsense. You know everyone liked you, right? Even Sandra at the front desk said she misses you. Sandra said that? Well, she said the temp they brought in is less fun than a funeral. From Sandra, that's basically a love letter. Melody laughed for the first time in days. Thanks, Kay. I needed that. So what are you going to do now? For now, I'm going to an accessibility event. After that, well, I'll figure it out. You're going to be okay, Mel. I know it. The nonprofit event was being held at a community center in Brooklyn. Melody arrived wearing a simple yellow dress and her most comfortable sneakers. She had officially given up trying to look sophisticated. Lucas greeted her with a beaming smile. Melody, I'm so glad you came. Thanks for the invite. This place is amazing. They signed as they spoke. The center was full of people of all ages, some deaf, some hearing, perhaps all communicating in a beautiful mix of speech and sign. There were workshops, presentations, and in the center of the main hall, a dance floor. Come on, Lucas signed. I want to introduce you to some people. The next 2 hours were the best Melody had had in weeks. She met teachers, artists, business owners, all working on inclusion projects. For the first time in a long time, she felt useful, valued. You should consider working with us, said Maria, the nonprofit coordinator. We have several corporate projects that could really use someone with your sensitivity. I'd love to learn more. That's when the music started. Lucas appeared beside her with a playful smile. Dance? Oh, I don't know. I'm kind of a walking disaster. Exactly, that's why it'll be fun. And it was. Lucas was an excellent dancer, guiding her with patience and humor. Melody found herself laughing, spinning, completely forgetting about the troubles of the past few days. You're enjoying yourself, Lucas signed during a break. I am. It's been a while since I felt like this. Like what? Light. Like I can just be myself without starting an international incident. You can always be yourself, he replied. The problem is with people who don't know how to value authenticity. Melody was about to respond when something caught her attention at the entrance of the room. Blake Stanford was standing there, in jeans and a casual shirt, looking completely out of place and completely focused on her. Her heart froze for a second, then sped up. "Excuse me," she said to Lucas, but when she turned back, Blake was gone. "Everything okay?" Lucas asked. "I thought I saw someone I knew." Outside the community center, Blake leaned against the car, trying to process what he had just seen. Melody laughing, dancing, looking genuinely happy, with another man. A strange, uncomfortable feeling settled in his chest. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something more complicated, more confusing. Will, his assistant, stepped up beside him. "Sir, did you find what you were looking for?" Blake had asked Will to find out where Melody was. He hadn't been able to stop thinking about her since she left the company. "I found it," he said simply. "And now?" Blake looked through the window of the community center. Melody was speaking animatedly with a group of people, her hands moving expressively. She looked radiant. "Now nothing," he finally said. "She's doing well. That's what matters." But as they got into the car, he couldn't help but glance back one more time, and that feeling in his chest only grew stronger. 3 days later, Melody was behind the counter at Beans and Dreams, a cozy coffee shop in the Upper East Side, trying to master the art of latte art. "Is that a leaf or a dead bird?" asked Jake, the cafe owner, looking at her latest attempt. "It was supposed to be a heart," Melody sighed, "but I think it looks more like an accident." "Hey, at least the coffee tastes good. And you're great with customers." It was true. Melody found that she liked the job. It was simple, honest, and the people who came into the cafe were generally kind. Generally. The exception came on a rainy Tuesday, in the form of a middle-aged man, well-dressed, with a permanently annoyed expression and a posture that screamed, "I'm more important than you." "Double espresso, and get it right this time," he said, without even looking at Melody. "Excuse me?" she asked politely. "This is your first time here." He finally looked up, scanning her with disdain. "You're new." "I am. Can I help you?" "Doubtful. Where's Jake?" "He's out making a delivery, but I can make your espresso." The man scoffed. "Of course you can. I bet you also give wine pairings and investment advice." Melody felt the sarcasm hit like a slap. "Actually, I can make a very good coffee and treat you more politely than you're treating me." He raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "I said I can make a good coffee. Do you want one or not? And who do you think you are to speak to me like that?" "Someone who works for a living and treats people with basic respect, a concept you may not be familiar with." The man's face turned red. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "Someone who clearly needs coffee and better manners, from what I can tell." "I'm Robert Stanford. My son owns one of the largest tech companies in the country." Melody felt her blood go cold, but she held her ground. "How interesting. I'm sure your son is proud of how politely you speak to people who serve you." "How dare you?" "How dare I work for a living? How dare I expect basic courtesy? Yes, imagine the nerve." Robert Stanford slammed his hand on the counter. "You're an insolent waitress who clearly doesn't know her place, and you're a rude customer who clearly lost his manners on the way to wealth." They stared at each other for a tense moment. "You can be sure your boss will hear about this," he finally said. "You can be sure he'll hear my side too." Robert stormed out without his coffee. Melody stood behind the counter, slightly trembling, not from fear, but from anger and adrenaline. "Well," she muttered to herself, "that explains where Blake got his charm." 3 hours later, at the Stanford Enterprise office, Will walked into Blake's room with an odd look on his face. "Sir, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I just got back from lunch with your father. We went to that new cafe near his office." Blake looked up from his documents. "And?" "Melody was working there." Blake froze. "Melody? Yes, sir. And, well, your father wasn't exactly kind to her." "What happened?" Will hesitated. "He was rude, very rude. Called her, well, things I'd rather not repeat, but she didn't stay quiet. She stood up for herself." Blake closed his eyes. "And how did it end?" "With your father storming out and Melody looking like she'd just gone 10 rounds with a hurricane and won." Blake couldn't decide if he felt proud or concerned. "Anything else?" "Well, she did mention that now she knows where you got your charm from." Despite everything, Blake smiled. "She said that?" "She did." "Sir, may I say something?" "Go ahead." "She may have argued with your father, but there were tears in her eyes when he left, and they weren't from fear." Blake was silent for a long moment. Thanks for telling me, Will. You're welcome, sir. Left alone in his office, Blake turned toward the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Melody was serving coffee and probably making someone smile. And probably still thinking he was just another arrogant Stanford. That feeling in his chest came back, stronger this time. Blake Stanford was in the executive meeting room, trying to focus on a presentation about international expansion. But all he could think about was the hurt expression on Melody's face after the confrontation with Robert Stanford. "Blake," his father said during a break, "are you paying attention? This European acquisition will require your full commitment." "I'm paying attention." "Good, because I can't have you distracted with frivolous matters." Something in his tone made Blake look up. "Frivolous matters? I heard you've taken an interest in an employee, a former receptionist." Blake felt his blood boil. "Where did you hear that?" "I know it's that insolent girl from the cafe who had the nerve to disrespect me." "You were rude to her," Robert scoffed. "I was direct. There's a difference." "You called a cafe employee," Blake stopped himself. "Actually, I don't even want to repeat what Will told me. She deserved it. Girls like her need to know their place." Blake stood up slowly. "Girls like her? Come on, Blake. A receptionist with no education, no class, no pedigree. What could you possibly want with someone like that? Maybe because she's the most genuine person I've met in years." Robert laughed dismissively. "Genuine? She's an opportunist. They all are." "No," Blake said, his voice dangerously low. "You're wrong. Blake, you're too smart to fall for the sweet, humble girl act. It's not an act, and even if it were, it worked because she makes me feel—" "What? Special? Blake, you're a billionaire. Any woman would make you feel special." Blake slammed his hand on the table. "She makes me feel human." The room went silent. "She makes me laugh," Blake continued, the words spilling out like a confession. "She makes me want to be better. She looks at me and sees just Blake, not the CEO, not the heir, not the bank account, just me." Robert looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Blake, you're in love with a clumsy receptionist." "I am." The words came out before he could stop them, and once spoken, he realized they were completely true. "I'm in love with her," he said again, more firmly, completely, irrevocably in love. Robert stood up, his face red with anger. "This is ridiculous. You're confusing physical attraction with—" "I'm not confused. For the first time in my life, I know exactly how I feel. Blake, think about the company, the family, your position. I need to think about my happiness." "Your happiness?" Robert laughed bitterly. "You'd think girls like that bring happiness? They bring scandal, blackmail, problems. Melody isn't like that." "Melody?" The name came out of his mouth with such contempt that Blake stepped forward, his tone darkening. "Be careful." "Or what? You'll choose a coffee shop waitress over your own family?" "If I have to." Robert stared at him for a long moment, then grabbed his jacket. "This conversation isn't over, Blake." "It is for me." "Not at all. I won't stand by and watch you ruin everything we've built for some girl with no class." Blake followed him to the elevator. "Dad, if you do anything to hurt Melody—" The elevator doors opened. Robert stepped inside but turned before they closed. "You're my son, Blake. But if you keep up with this ridiculous obsession, maybe it's time to reconsider the company's succession." The elevator doors closed, leaving Blake alone in the hallway, trembling with anger. Out in the parking lot of Stanford Enterprise, the argument continued. Blake had followed his father, determined to set things straight once and for all. "Dad, you need to understand." "What I need to understand," Robert interrupted, "is how my brilliant son fell for a little girl with no background who serves coffee." "Stop calling her that." "What? A little girl? That's what she is. A disposable employee you've put on a ridiculous pedestal." "She's not disposable. She's incredible." "Blake, look around you. Look at where we are. This company, this empire, it demands a wife who matches the position, not a receptionist who trips over her own feet. If you speak about her like that one more time, what are you going to do? Turn your back on your father? For a girl you've known less than a month? For the woman I love." Blake's voice echoed through the parking lot. Robert stayed silent for a moment, then shook his head with disdain. "You don't know what love is, Blake. You know what newness feels like, and newness fades. Not this time. It will, and when it does, you'll thank me for trying to protect you." Robert got in his car and drove away, leaving Blake alone in the parking lot, watching the taillights disappear. What he didn't know was that, behind a concrete column, Melody had witnessed the whole argument. She had come back to the building to retrieve a special pen she'd forgotten at the front desk, a gift from her grandmother Rose that she used for signing important documents. Sandra had called to say the pen was still there, and Melody didn't feel ready to start a new chapter without it. But when she reached the parking lot, she heard raised voices, and she instantly recognized Blake's voice. Hidden behind the column, she heard every word. His confession, his anger, his passionate defense, and the cruel words from his father. Girl with no background. Disposable employee. The words hurt more than she expected, not because they were completely false, but because there was some truth in them. She really did come from a different world. She really didn't have the pedigree of the social elite. But hearing Blake defend her so strongly, hearing him admit that he loved her, Melody's heart broke into small, conflicted pieces. He loved her. But that love was costing him his relationship with his family. She walked away quietly, without picking up the pen, without letting Blake know she had been there. She wandered through the streets of Manhattan with tears in her eyes, not from sadness, but from an emotional confusion she didn't know how to process. The next day, Lucas showed up at the coffee shop with a bright smile and an official envelope. "I've got news," he signed, handing her the papers. Melody read quickly. It was a formal offer from the nonprofit, a 6-month project in Seattle, implementing accessibility programs at tech companies. "This is an amazing opportunity," she said aloud, translating in sign language too. "And you're perfect for it," Lucas replied. "Maria was really impressed by you at the event. She wants you to lead the entire project." Melody looked at the documents. It was everything she had dreamed of. Meaningful work, independence, the chance to make a difference. And it was on the other side of the country, far from Blake Stanford and all the complications he brought. "When do I need to give them an answer? They want someone in 2 weeks. You'd start next month." Melody closed her eyes. Seattle. A new beginning. Far from parking lot arguments and broken hearts. "I accept," she said, signing the papers before she could change her mind. "Are you sure?" Lucas asked, noticing the hesitation in her eyes. "I am." She lied. "It's time to move on." And as she handed back the signed documents, Melody tried to ignore the voice in her head, insisting she was making a huge mistake. Blake Stanford had handled billion-dollar acquisitions, negotiated with presidents, and led meetings with hundreds of executives. But he had never been as nervous as he was that Thursday, waiting for Melody to arrive at the Stanford Enterprise rooftop. "Sir," Will said for the 10th time, "are you sure you don't want me to stay close by? Just in case something goes wrong?" "Nothing's going to go wrong," Blake replied, adjusting his tie for the 5th time. "It's just dinner. What could go wrong?" Will looked around. The rooftop was decorated with soft lights, a table for two with a panorama of the city, candles, flowers, all of it 50 stories high, on a windy night. "Nothing at all, sir. Absolutely nothing." Blake had spent the entire week trying to figure out where Melody was living. It wasn't hard. She was still in the same tiny apartment in Queens. The hard part was convincing her to come. The elevator dinged, and Melody stepped out wearing a simple light blue dress and an expression of pure suspicion. "Blake, what is this?" "Dinner," he said, trying to sound casual. "On the rooftop of your company, 50 stories up, with a view of the whole city." "You don't like it?" Melody looked around, wide-eyed. "Don't like it? Blake, it's too beautiful. It looks like a movie set." "Good, because you deserve a movie set." She blushed. "You didn't have to do this, especially after everything." "That's exactly why I had to." Blake pulled out her chair, and everything seemed to be going perfectly, until a strong gust of wind swept across the rooftop. All the candles went out at once, napkins flew like white birds, and the flower vase tilted dangerously. "Oh boy," Melody said, trying to hold her hair down as it flew in every direction. "I think the city's trying to tell us something." "It's telling me I should have checked the weather forecast," Blake sighed, rushing to save the candles. That's when the waiter arrived, carrying a tray of gourmet appetizers and a clearly uncomfortable expression. "Mr. Stanford," he said with a stuffy voice, "I'm afraid I might be developing an allergic reaction to something up here." Achoo. The sneeze was so strong it shook his whole body, nearly tipping the tray. Are you okay? Melody asked, concerned. Yes, it's just achoo, the flowers, I think. Achoo! Blake looked at the elaborate arrangement of lilies he had specially ordered. You're allergic to lilies? Apparently. Chew, you learn something new every day. Melody was trying not to laugh. You know what? We can have dinner without flowers. No, Blake said with determination. It's going to be perfect. He ran to remove the arrangement, tripped over a gust of wind, and managed to knock over half the decorations in the process. Blake, Melody said gently. Relax, it's okay. It's not okay. It was supposed to be romantic and special and… chew. The waiter was still sneezing when a pigeon suddenly decided to land right on Melody's shoulder. She froze, looking at the bird with a mix of surprise and amusement. Hi there, she said to the pigeon. Were you invited to dinner too? The pigeon tilted its head as if considering the question. Blake stopped in the middle of the chaos and looked at the scene. Melody with a pigeon on her shoulder, talking to it like it was just another guest, while the wind kept swirling everything around them and the waiter kept sneezing nonstop. And he started to laugh. A deep, genuine laugh that grew until he had to lean on the table to catch his breath. What's so funny? Melody asked, still frozen because of the pigeon. All of this, he said between laughs. I wanted it to be perfect, and it's turning into the most ridiculous disaster in the history of romantic dinners. And what's wrong with that? Blake stopped laughing and looked at her. You're not frustrated? Why would I be? Because of the wind? The allergic waiter? My new friend here? She gently petted the pigeon, who seemed to enjoy it. Blake, this is way more fun than any perfect dinner would have been. The pigeon finally flew away, and Melody got up, walking over to where Blake stood. You know what I learned working at the coffee shop? What? That the best moments are the imperfect ones. The customers I remember most are the ones who spilled coffee on themselves, or tripped at the door, or spilled coffee on the shoes of a billionaire CEO. Blake smiled. Melody, I need to tell you something. A particularly strong gust of wind chose that exact moment to hit the rooftop. The whole table tilted, plates slid, and Blake had to catch Melody to keep her from losing her balance. They stood there, holding each other in the middle of complete chaos. What were you going to tell me? She asked, softly. Blake looked into her eyes, deciding it didn't matter if the world was falling apart around them. But I love you. The wind stopped, as if it had heard his words. I love you, Melody Hart. I love how you turn disasters into adventures. I love how you make everyone feel important. I love how you make me laugh, even when everything's going wrong. Melody stayed quiet for a long moment. Blake, I know we come from different worlds. I know my family's complicated. I know we don't seem like the obvious match, but… She interrupted him with a kiss. It started out gentle, hesitant, as if she were checking if it was real. Then it deepened, and Blake felt like the world had finally fallen into place. When they pulled apart, Melody's eyes were shining. I love you too, she whispered. Even though it's a terrible idea. Why terrible? Because we're from different worlds. Because your family hates me. Because I still trip on revolving doors. And that's exactly why it works. They spent the night on the rooftop, talking, laughing, sharing the dessert that had survived the chaos. Blake talked about the pressure of being the heir, how he felt trapped by expectations. Melody spoke about growing up without money but with plenty of love, about Grandma Rose who taught her that language doesn't need words. When the sun started to rise over Manhattan, they were lying on the couch in Blake's office, her nestled in his arms. Melody, Blake murmured into her hair. Huh? Thank you. For what? For helping me remember who I really am. She snuggled closer. And who are you, really? Someone who can be happy, even when everything's going wrong. The next morning, Blake woke up alone. Melody had left, leaving only a note on the pillow next to his. Blake, thank you for showing me that I'm worthy of being loved just the way I am. You gave me the most precious gift anyone could give. The certainty that I deserve something good. And that's exactly why I have to go. You have an empire to lead and a family to reconcile. I have a future to build. Maybe, if we're lucky, our paths will cross again when we're truly ready to be who we are. With all my love, Melody. P.S. Tell the pigeon he was a wonderful dinner guest. Blake read the note 3 times, his heart breaking a little more with each read. She was gone, and for the first time in his life, Blake Stanford had no idea how to fix it. Blake Stanford spent the first 3 days after Melody's disappearance doing something he'd never done before, searching for someone like an amateur private investigator. First, he went to her apartment in Queens. The landlady, a short and suspicious Italian woman, looked him up and down before informing him that sweet girl moved out without leaving an address. Then he went back to the Beans and Dreams cafe. Jake, the owner, just shook his head. She said she had a new opportunity, something about Seattle, but she didn't give any details. Seattle. Blake clung to that word like a castaway to a piece of driftwood. Do you have any way to reach her? Son, Jake said, drying a cup, if she wanted you to know where she was, she wouldn't have disappeared without a word. Hard to argue with that logic. Back at the office, Blake tried to throw himself into work. He had a major merger to finalize, 3 presentations to prepare, and a quarterly report that was already late. Instead, he stood by the window, looking out over the city, wondering if Melody was still out there somewhere, or if she had already gone to the other side of the country. Will walked into the room with a stack of documents. Sir, you need to sign these contracts. Blake picked up the pen and paused. Will, do you know of any accessibility projects in Seattle? Sir? NGOs, companies, anything involving sign language. Will hesitated. I can look into it, but may I ask why? Blake looked at his assistant. Will had been with him for 5 years, had seen all his moods, all his changes, all his failed relationships. Because I'm trying to find someone. The receptionist? Melody, yes. Will sat in the chair across from the desk. Sir, with all due respect, maybe she left for a reason. What reason? Maybe she feels like you two are from very different worlds. Blake gave a bitter laugh. Seems like everyone thinks that. And what do you think? I think different worlds can still meet. Will was quiet for a moment. I'll start looking into Seattle. In the following weeks, something strange began to happen at Stanford Enterprise. Blake Stanford, known for his cold professionalism and laser-sharp focus, started acting different. During a meeting about budget cuts, when the CFO suggested letting go of the night cleaning staff, Blake asked, "Do these people have families?" "Well, yes, sir, but then let's find another way to reduce costs." The next week, he stopped in the hallway to ask a junior employee if she was adjusting well to her new role. 2 weeks later, he implemented a mentorship program for new hires. Sandra, at the front desk, mentioned to her friends in HR, "I don't know what's happened to the CEO, but he's been more human lately. Yesterday he asked if I was okay when he saw me sneezing." Amanda Richardson, from HR, had a hunch. Did this start after that girl left the company? Melody? I think so. Why? Just curious. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, Melody was discovering she had a natural talent for leading projects. The NGO office in Seattle was small but welcoming, with a view of Puget Sound. Melody had been assigned to implement accessibility programs in 5 tech companies in the area. "Are you sure you've never done this before?" asked David, the regional coordinator, as he reviewed her progress reports. "I'm sure. Why?" "Because you've accomplished more in 2 weeks than our previous team did in 2 months. It was true. Melody had found that her straightforward approach worked wonders with tech executives. Instead of formal presentations full of jargon, she simply showed how inclusive communication worked in practice. "Look," she said during one presentation, "sign language isn't complicated. It's just another way to talk." And then she signed, "Good morning, nice to meet you," as she spoke the words. The executives were fascinated. In 3 weeks, she had trained 50 employees, implemented visual communication systems in 2 offices, and helped one company hire its first deaf employees. "You should consider making this a permanent career," said Maria, the director of the NGO, during a video call. "I'm thinking about it," Melody replied, and she truly was. The work was rewarding, she was making a difference, and Seattle was a beautiful city. She should have been completely happy. So why did she wake up every morning feeling like something was missing? The answer came on a rainy Thursday, while she was training the HR team of a startup. The company's CEO, a young programmer who had built the business from the ground up, made a self-deprecating joke about his lack of social skills. Melody laughed, and for a moment she expected to hear a familiar laugh echo hers. When she realized she was the only one laughing, her chest tightened. Blake. She missed the way he laughed at her clumsiness. The way he made her feel like disasters could be charming. The way he looked at her like she was the most fascinating thing in the world. "Stop it," she muttered to herself. "You made the right choice." But the quiet nights in her small Capitol Hill apartment suggested otherwise. On a Friday morning, the invitation arrived. Melody was sipping coffee and reviewing presentations when the email appeared in her inbox. National Corporate Accessibility Conference, New York. She almost deleted it without reading. She received dozens of event invitations every week. But something about the name of the organizing company made her stop. Stanford Enterprise. Melody stared at the screen for a long moment. Was it just a coincidence? Did Blake know she was in Seattle? Was this some kind of indirect attempt to reach out? She read the email 3 times. It was professional, formal, inviting her as the keynote speaker to talk about practical implementation of inclusion programs in tech companies. At the end of the message, one line caught her eye. The conference will feature an opening speech by CEO Blake Stanford, titled "The Future of Inclusive Communication in the Corporate World." Melody closed the laptop. She couldn't go. It would be too complicated, too painful, too confusing. But she spent the entire day thinking about the invitation. That night, she called Lucas on video chat. "I need advice," she signed as soon as he appeared on screen. "About what?" She told him about the invitation, about Blake, about the whole confusing situation. "Do you still love him?" Lucas asked directly. Melody sighed. "Yes. And does he love you?" "He said he does." "Then what's the problem?" "The problem is that we come from different worlds. His family hates me, and—" Lucas interrupted her with a sign. "Melody, can I say something?" "Of course. You've spent your whole life feeling different, right? Because of your grandmother, because of where you come from, because of who you are." She nodded. "And now you've found someone who loves you exactly the way you are. But you're running away because he's different too?" Melody stayed silent. "Maybe," Lucas continued, "different people are exactly what each other needs." After the call, Melody stayed up late, watching the Seattle rain and thinking about Lucas's words. The next morning, she replied to the email. "I accept the invitation. I'll be in New York next week." And as she hit send, she felt a mix of fear and excitement she hadn't felt since the first time she spilled coffee on Blake Stanford's shoes. The flight from Seattle to New York felt like the longest of Melody's life. Not because of the 6 hours in the air, but because of the 6 million conflicting thoughts that went through her mind during the trip. "What am I doing?" she murmured to the airplane window, watching the clouds go by. "I'm going to see Blake, give my presentation professionally, and fly back to Seattle. Simple as that." The woman next to her, an older lady with gray hair who had spent the whole flight knitting, looked over her glasses. "Honey, you've been talking to yourself for 2 hours. Either you're rehearsing a very important presentation or you're going to see a man." Melody blushed. "How do you know?" "I'm 60 and have 4 daughters. I recognize that I'm making a mistake but can't stop myself face from a mile away." "And what's your advice?" The woman smiled. "If it's a presentation, relax. If it's a man, take a deep breath and be honest. And if it's both, then, sweetheart, you're in trouble." The hotel in Manhattan was far too elegant for Melody's budget, but the conference organizers had insisted on paying for accommodations for all keynote speakers. She settled into the small but comfortable room, trying not to think about the fact that she was just a few miles away from Blake. "Professional," she told the mirror as she adjusted the navy blue blazer she had bought just for the occasion. "You're a respected professional giving a talk on accessibility. You're not a clumsy former receptionist chasing after a billionaire ex-boss." The conference auditorium was in the convention center, a modern, impressive building that made Melody feel small the moment she walked in. There were hundreds of people, executives, consultants, advocates, all talking in groups about corporate inclusion and best practices. Melody checked the schedule. Her talk was set for 2 in the afternoon. Blake's opening speech was at 10 in the morning. "I can avoid him completely," she thought. "I'll come in after he finishes, give my talk, and leave before anything awkward happens." That plan lasted until she heard a familiar voice echo through the auditorium's sound system. "Good morning. My name is Blake Stanford, and I want to talk to you about how a receptionist completely changed my perspective on communication." Melody stopped in the middle of the hallway, as if she had just been punched in the stomach. She couldn't help it. She quietly stepped into the back of the auditorium, hiding behind a group of people to watch. Blake was on stage, as polished as ever, but something about him was different. There was a softness she didn't remember seeing before. "A few months ago," he continued, "I witnessed something that changed my life. An employee at my company, with no formal training, no preparation, helped a deaf visitor in such a natural and compassionate way that it made me realize how disconnected I was from the people who really matter." Melody felt her heart beating faster. "This young woman taught me that communication isn't about words. It's about connection. It's about truly seeing the people in front of us." That's when Melody noticed. In the corner of the stage, a woman was interpreting Blake's entire speech in sign language. She covered her mouth with her hand, surprised. "She taught me," Blake went on, now looking directly at the interpreter, "that when we truly want to communicate with someone, we find a way, and that the most powerful form of communication is simply caring." The audience was completely silent, taking in every word. That's why, starting today, all Stanford Enterprise conferences and events will include live sign language interpretation. Because inclusive communication isn't a kindness, it's a responsibility. Applause erupted throughout the room. The interpreter smiled and clapped as well, signing her approval. "I want to thank," Blake said as the applause quieted down, "the young woman who taught me to listen with my eyes and speak with my heart. Wherever she is, I hope she knows she didn't just change a company, she changed a life." That's when their eyes met. Blake had spotted Melody at the back of the auditorium, and the look on his face changed completely. Surprise, joy, nervousness, all mixed in a way she could read even from across the room. Melody felt tears sting her eyes, not from sadness but from something much more complicated. Pride, maybe, or recognition, or the realization that her actions had truly made a difference. Blake finished the speech, but his eyes stayed locked on hers during the entire Q&A session. When it ended, Melody tried to slip out through the side exit, but he was faster. He caught up with her in the hallway, still wearing the lapel mic clipped to his shirt. "Melody?" "Blake." She tried to sound casual, like running into him was the most normal thing in the world. "You came. You invited me. I was hoping. I wasn't sure." They stood there, in the middle of a hallway filled with important people discussing corporate strategies like two awkward teenagers. "Your talk was beautiful," she finally said. "It was true, every word." "Blake? Melody, can I talk to you? In private?" She looked around. People were starting to notice them, especially after the speech that basically described her as his inspiration. "I don't know if that's a good idea. Please, 5 minutes." They found an empty conference room. Blake closed the door and turned to face her. "How's Seattle?" "It's great. The work is rewarding. The city is beautiful. The people are kind. You seem happy." "I am." She paused. "I'm trying to be." Blake took a step toward her. "Melody, I missed you." "Blake, don't. I missed your disaster stories. I missed the way you make everyone feel special. I missed laughing with you." "Stop. I missed the way you reminded me the world can be good." Melody closed her eyes. "Blake, you can't do this." "What? Tell the truth?" "Ask me to stay." He went silent. "That's what you're doing, isn't it?" she continued. "This whole speech, this whole conference, it was to make me come back." "Partly, yes." "And you think that's fair?" Blake looked confused. "Fair? I have a life in Seattle. I have a job I love, important projects, people who count on me. I know. I have a mission, Blake. I'm making a difference in real people's lives." "I know that too." Melody turned toward the window. "Then you know why I can't give all that up for a man." "Even if it's a man you love?" The question hung in the air between them. "Even if it is," she finally said. "Especially if it is." "I don't understand." Melody turned back to him. "Blake, I love you, more than makes sense, more than is practical, more than I should. But I can't build my life around someone else, no matter how much I love them. I'm not asking you to build your life around me." "You're not?" "I'm asking us to build something together." Melody shook her head. "Your world and mine, they're just too different." They were different. But maybe they can meet somewhere in the middle. For a moment she wavered. The look on his face was so hopeful, so vulnerable. "Melody," he said gently, "I'm not asking you to give up who you are. I'm asking us to be who we are, together." She was quiet for a long time. "I have to go," she said at last. "My talk is in an hour." Blake nodded, the disappointment clear in his eyes. "Of course, I don't want to get in the way of your work." Melody walked to the door, then stopped. "Blake, yes, thank you for what you said in the speech, for making the company more inclusive, for seeing me. Thank you for teaching me how to see." And with that, she walked out of the room, leaving Blake alone with the weight of unspoken words and unexplored possibilities. 3 days after the conference, Melody was back in Seattle, trying to focus on a presentation about implementing visual communication systems when her phone rang. "Melody, finally!" Kaylee's excited voice came through the line. "I've tried calling you 1,000 times. Hi, Kay. Sorry, I've been busy with work. It's okay, but I need to talk to you. Will you be able to come to my wedding on Saturday?" Melody blinked, confused. "Your wedding? Kaylee, you weren't even dating anyone when I left New York." "It's a long story. I met Tyler 2 months ago at a coffee shop. Ironic, right? And we decided life's too short to wait. It'll be a small ceremony in Central Park." "In Central Park? Kay, that's crazy?" "I know, but Tyler's a freelance photographer and always dreamed of getting married outdoors. And I thought, why not?" Melody smiled in spite of herself. "Well, if anyone was going to have a spontaneous wedding in a park, it would be you. So you'll come? Please? You're one of my dearest friends, and it would be perfect to have you there." Melody hesitated. Going back to New York so soon after the conference felt complicated. "I'm not sure, Kay. Work." "Melody Hart, are you really going to miss your friend's wedding because of work? Besides, it's going to be fun. Tyler has some wild friends. There'll be music, food, and probably a few hilarious disasters." "When you put it that way, how can I say no?" "Great. I'll send you the details by email. And Mel, wear something comfortable. This is the kind of wedding where guests might end up saving the cake." Saturday arrived with one of those perfect autumn days in New York. Melody wore a simple floral dress and flat shoes. She had learned from experience that outdoor events and heels didn't mix, especially when she was involved. Central Park looked beautiful, with golden leaves gently falling and that soft kind of light that made everything feel like a romantic movie. The ceremony site was a small grassy area near the lake, decorated with simple flower arrangements and folding chairs that were clearly rented on a tight budget. "Melody?" Kaylee came running over, glowing in a vintage wedding dress that probably cost less than a fancy dinner, but made her look like a princess. "You came." "Of course I did. You look beautiful, Kay." "Thank you, and you got here just in time for the chaos." "What chaos?" As if on cue, a tall man with a beard and a panicked look rushed over. "Kaylee, we've got a problem. The minister is stuck in Brooklyn Bridge traffic." "This is Tyler," Kaylee said calmly. "Tyler, this is Melody." "Melody, my panicked fiancé." "Nice to meet you. So, about the minister?" "We'll wait, or find someone online to marry us. Or improvise." Kaylee shrugged. "Honey, if I manage to plan this wedding in 3 weeks, I can deal with a late minister." That's when a loud buzzing sound echoed above them. "What's that?" Melody asked, looking up. "Oh, that's my cousin Josh with the drone," Tyler explained. "He offered to film the ceremony from above." The buzzing grew louder and more out of control. Tyler frowned. "That doesn't sound right." "Watch out," someone yelled. The drone dove toward the cake table like a mechanical bird on a kamikaze mission. Splash! The 3-tier cake, clearly homemade and made with love, turned into a blast of whipped cream, strawberries, and frustration. "My cake!" Tyler groaned. "Josh!" Kaylee yelled at her cousin, who was desperately trying to control the drone. "Sorry, the controls jammed." The drone kept flying wildly, now with cake stuck to the blades, spreading whipped cream on the guests like edible confetti. Melody couldn't help it. She started laughing. "What are you laughing at?" Kaylee asked, wiping whipped cream from her hair. "This, all of this." "Kay, your wedding is already more memorable than any fancy hotel ceremony." "She's right," a familiar voice said behind her. Melody turned and nearly choked. Blake Stanford was standing there, dressed in a casual suit with an amused smile and a smudge of whipped cream on his tie. "Blake, what are you doing here?" "I invited him." Kaylee said with a guilty smile. You what? Well, I might have mentioned the wedding to Sandra, who mentioned it to Amanda from HR, who told Will, who told Blake. Blake stepped closer. Actually, it was more direct than that. Kaylee called me herself and said you'd be here. Melody looked back and forth between the two of them. You set this up? We did, Kaylee admitted, and I don't regret it one bit. Kaylee, Melody, the two of you are ridiculously in love and being ridiculously stubborn. Someone had to do something. Before Melody could argue, the minister came rushing in, out of breath and red-faced. Sorry, traffic was terrible. Did I miss anything? Everyone looked around, the destroyed cake, the whipped cream-covered guests, the drone now stuck in a nearby tree. No, Minister, Tyler said. You got here at the perfect time. The ceremony that followed was the sweetest and most chaotic Melody had ever seen. Kaylee and Tyler looked at each other like they were the only two people in the world, even with bits of cake in their hair. The vows were interrupted by a particularly bold squirrel, and the rings nearly rolled into the lake. But when they kissed as husband and wife, with the golden sunlight coming through the trees and friends clapping around them, Melody felt tears in her eyes. Beautiful, isn't it? Blake whispered next to her. It is, she admitted. After the ceremony, while the guests improvised a little reception with the food that had survived the drone, Blake walked up to her. Want to take a walk? Blake? Please. Just a walk. They walked to the edge of the lake, where ducks swam peacefully, unaware of the wedding chaos that had just taken place nearby. Melody, Blake began, I've been thinking a lot about our talk at the conference. Blake, I already said. I know what you said, and you were right. She looked at him, surprised. I was? You can't give up your life for me, and I can't give up mine for you. Melody's heart sank, even though that was exactly what she had said, right? But, Blake went on, that doesn't mean we can't build something together. I don't understand. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Melody, what if it's not about New York versus Seattle? What if it's about us versus the distance? What do you mean? Stanford Enterprise needs to expand to the West Coast. We've had plans for an office in Seattle for years. Melody frowned. And we need someone to lead our accessibility and inclusion programs, nationwide. Blake, this isn't charity. I'm not creating a job for you. It's a real need for the company, and you are the most qualified person I know. Melody stayed silent, processing. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a partnership, professional and personal. And how would that work? You'd keep doing your work, but as the National Director of Inclusion at Stanford Enterprise. I'd split my time between New York and Seattle. We'd build something together, with neither of us giving up who we are. Melody looked at him. You'd do that? You'd change your life like that? Melody, you changed my life the second you spilled coffee on my shoes. I still can't believe you remember that fondly. I remember all of it fondly. Blake stepped closer. Melody Hart, you make me want to be the best version of myself. You taught me that real power isn't about controlling people, it's about lifting them up. You showed me that love isn't about ownership, it's about partnership. He got down on one knee. What? She whispered. Melody, he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Would you do me the honor of building a life together? Of being my partner in everything? Of marrying me? Melody looked at the ring, simple, elegant, perfect, and then at Blake, kneeling on the grass in Central Park, with wedding cake still on his tie and love in his eyes. Blake Stanford, she said, her voice trembling, you're proposing to me in a public park after the most chaotic wedding in history. I am. With whipped cream on your suit. I am. And expecting me to say yes. Blake smiled. I'm hoping you will. Melody knelt too, so they were eye to eye. Yes, she said. Yes to all of it. To the partnership, to the love, to building something amazing together. And there, by the lake in Central Park, with ducks as their witnesses and the distant echoes of laughter, Blake slid the ring on Melody's finger and she kissed him like it was both the first and the last time. When they pulled apart, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. I knew you'd say yes, Blake whispered against her forehead. How did you know? Because we're the kind of people who turn disasters into adventures. And because you're stubborn enough to set up ambushes at weddings. That too. And as the sun set over New York, painting the sky in gold and pink, Melody finally understood that sometimes the best stories begin with accidents and end with choices. 1 year later, on a sunny September morning, Melody Hart Stanford stood in front of the hotel room mirror, adjusting her veil for the 10th time, and trying not to think of all the ways she could trip walking down the aisle. "Breathe, dear," said Rose, her grandmother, who at 82 had insisted on traveling from Ohio to New York to see her granddaughter get married. "You're more nervous now than when you were a child learning to sign." "That's because back then, the worst I could do was spill a glass of water," Melody replied, speaking and signing at the same time, as it had become natural for her. "Now I might knock over an entire altar." Rose laughed, her voice blending with the expressive gestures Melody had known all her life. "Melody Rose Hart," she said, using her full name like she did when she wanted to make a point. "You spent the last year leading an institute that changed hundreds of lives. You helped companies in 12 states become truly inclusive, and you managed to teach a stubborn billionaire to sign fluently. He still makes that concentration face when he tries to sign supercalifragilisticexpialidocious," Melody smiled, "because you insisted on teaching him impossible words." It was a patience test, and he passed. A knock at the door interrupted them. Kaylee appeared, glowing in her role as maid of honor, holding a bouquet. "Showtime, bride." The garden at the Stanford Country Club had been transformed into a magical space. Chairs arranged in a semicircle around a simple, elegant floral altar, exactly how Melody had asked. But what made her smile most was the presence of 2 sign language interpreters, placed carefully so that all the guests, deaf and hearing, could follow every moment of the ceremony. "Ready?" asked Daniel, Blake's brother, who had offered to walk her down the aisle when he learned Melody's father had passed away years ago. "Ready," she lied, holding his arm. The music began, an instrumental version of At Last that Blake had chosen because, as he said, it perfectly described how he felt about finding her. Melody started walking, and her attention immediately went to Blake, standing at the altar with a smile that could light up all of Manhattan. Beside him was Will, serving as best man, and she could see Lucas in the front row, signing beautiful over and over with a glowing smile. Next to Lucas was a dark-haired woman Melody knew was Hannah, his new fiancée. They had met during an inclusive art project in Brooklyn. But it was when she saw Robert Stanford in the second row that Melody almost stumbled. Blake's father was there, wearing an expression she had never seen before. Not exactly warm, but respectful. He gave a small nod when their eyes met, and Melody was so surprised she nearly forgot to keep walking. "Focus on the groom," Daniel whispered. "He looks like he's about to faint from nerves." It was true. Blake, usually so composed, was clearly emotional, his eyes shining as he watched her approach. When she finally reached the altar, Daniel handed her off to Blake with a quiet whisper. "Take good care of her. She's special." "I know," Blake replied, taking Melody's hands. "Hi." "Hi," she said, smiling. "You didn't run." "Never." Pastor Charles, who had been chosen specifically because he was fluent in sign language, smiled at the two of them. "Dear friends," he began, speaking and signing at the same time, "we are here today to celebrate not only the union of Blake and Melody, but also the beauty of communication in all its forms." Melody could barely focus on the formal words of the ceremony, her attention fixed on Blake's eyes and the surreal feeling that this was really happening. Then it came time for the vows, and that's when the emotion truly took over. Blake went first, clearing his throat nervously. "Melody," he began, speaking and signing with a fluency that made her smile with pride. "You taught me that real communication isn't about perfect words. It's about sincere intention. You showed me that love isn't about finding someone perfect, it's about perfectly loving someone's imperfections." He paused to breathe, clearly trying not to get too emotional. "I promise to stand beside you through all our future disasters, and we both know there will be many. I promise to laugh at your clumsy moments and let you laugh at mine. I promise to build a world with you where every form of communication is valued, where every kind of love is celebrated." Melody was openly crying when it was her turn. "Blake Stanford," she said, signing to Lucas and Grandma Rose as she spoke, "you accepted me just as I was from the moment I spilled coffee on your expensive shoes." Laughter rippled through the audience. "You gave me not only love, but purpose. Not just a future, but the confidence that I deserve that future. I promise to keep spilling coffee on you, metaphorically, for as long as you can stand it. I promise to make you laugh every day, even when we're old and can't remember where we put our keys. She paused, looking directly into his eyes. And I promise that no matter where life takes us, I will always find a way to communicate with you. With words, with signs, with looks, or simply with love. When they exchanged rings, Melody noticed that Blake had something engraved inside his, signed in sign language, the word always. By the power vested in me, Pastor Charles said, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Blake, you may kiss the bride. The kiss was gentle, tender, and followed by enthusiastic applause, both spoken and visual, with many guests clapping in sign language. At the reception that followed, there were moments Melody knew she would never forget. Robert Stanford came up to her during dinner. Melody, he said formally, I owe you an apology. Mr. Stanford. Please, let me finish. I judged you unfairly. I based my opinion on foolish assumptions about social class and background. But watching my son over this past year, seeing how he has grown under your influence, I realize I was completely wrong. Melody was speechless. Blake is happier, more grounded, more himself since he met you, and the company has never been more respected or successful. You didn't just win my son's heart, you helped transform our family business. Thank you, Mr. Stanford. That means a lot. Robert, he corrected gently, and I hope we can start fresh. Later, to everyone's surprise, Eliza showed up at the reception. Melody saw her approaching and braced herself for some kind of confrontation, but Eliza looked genuinely remorseful. Melody, can I speak with you for a minute? They stepped away from the crowd. I want to apologize, Eliza said, for everything, for the gossip, the cruelty, for trying to ruin your reputation. Eliza, no, let me finish. I was jealous, not of Blake specifically, but of what you two had, the authenticity, the real connection. My marriage to Daniel is going well, but it took me a while to realize I was trying to destroy something genuine because of my own insecurity. Melody stayed silent for a moment. I appreciate the apology, and I wish you and Daniel happiness. Thank you, and congratulations. You two are perfect together. The most emotional moment of the evening came when Lucas approached the couple during the dance. Can I share some news? He signed, with Hannah smiling beside him. Of course, Melody replied. Hannah said yes. Lucas showed his engagement ring, and Melody let out a scream so loud that half the reception turned to see what was going on. When? She signed quickly. This morning. I wanted to tell you in person. Blake came over and, to Lucas's surprise, signed perfectly. Congratulations. She's perfect for you. Lucas beamed and signed back. I learned from the best how to find the right person. Later that night, when the party was winding down, Melody found herself back in the Stanford Enterprise office. Now her office, too, as director of the Inclusive Communication Institute. I can't believe we're here, she said to Blake as they walked through the empty halls. At the company? Married, happy, with jobs we love and people who support us. Blake stopped and pulled her close. Do you remember when you said people like you didn't belong in places like this? I do. You were wrong. This place was never truly complete until you got here. On Monday, Melody was in her office when Sandra at reception called. Melody, we have a situation downstairs. What kind of situation? The new receptionist, Lisa. Well, you need to come see for yourself. Melody went down and found a young Latina woman with curly hair standing in the middle of the lobby, surrounded by scattered papers and looking completely panicked. What happened? Melody asked gently. I tripped over my own purse and dropped all the important files, the girl said, nearly in tears. It's my first day and I've already messed everything up. Melody smiled, remembering another first day not too long ago. What's your name? Lisa. Lisa Martinez. Lisa, can I give you some advice? The girl nodded. Accidents happen. What matters is how we respond to them. Melody knelt down and started helping Lisa gather the papers. You know, she said as they worked, on my first day here I flew through the revolving door and landed right in the middle of the lobby. Literally. Lisa stopped picking up papers and looked at her. Really? Really? And do you know what I learned? What? That sometimes our worst moments lead to the best ones. Sometimes stumbling is just the first step in an incredible journey. Lisa gave a shy smile. And now you're the director? And now I'm married to the CEO who laughed at my disasters instead of firing me for them. When they finished organizing the papers, Melody stood up. Lisa, can I share the best piece of advice I ever received? Sure. Melody smiled, thinking of Grandma Rose, of Blake, and everyone who had helped her get there. Speak from the heart. Be genuine. Be kind. Be yourself. Because no matter how different we may be, no matter what language we speak or how we communicate, when we speak from the heart, someone will always understand. Lisa nodded, breathing a little easier. Thank you, Mrs. Stanford. You're welcome. And Lisa? Yes? Welcome to the family. As she walked back to the elevator, Melody thought about how strange and wonderful life could be. A year ago, she was the clumsy girl tripping through doors. Now she was the woman helping others find their own path. And as the elevator doors closed, the very same elevator where she had spilled coffee on the shoes of the man who was now her husband, Melody smiled at her reflection and whispered, Thank you, Grandma Rose. You were right. When we speak from the heart, someone always understands. The doors opened on her floor, and she stepped out into another day of building bridges through communication. What did you think of Melody and Blake's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? Subscribe to the channel and click the bell to stay updated on all our stories. And don't forget to watch more touching stories by clicking right here.